Hi everybody, Zandile here, aka Miss Masumbuga on Twitter, and welcome to my YouTube space. The aim of this space is to center the South African narrative from an ideologically African perspective, looking at how we got where we actually are, and answering the question, what happens after the revolution? Part 1 of this essay is titled The Pacification of Black South African Emancipation, and speaks to how Black South Africans have been encouraged to be passive observers in their own history and present. Feel free to engage and subscribe to get the next part. Enjoy the video.
The dreams of a South Africa which represents all South Africans.
The Pacification of Black South African Emancipation. 26 years after the first democratic elections, Black South Africans are in a dire situation as the most marginalized in the land of their own ancestors. This statement is not an opinion, but a fact proven by anecdote and data. One might argue that since liberation, the only advantages given to Black South Africans have been the freedoms of movement, association, speech, the right to sit on benches, and the right to assimilate into the status quo and occupy formerly white spaces. This has been done on terms set about almost exclusively by the people who had previously legally deemed them less than human and who controlled that deity of our times, the market. During a lecture across the Atlantic, African-American philosopher, political activist, and author Dr. Cornel West put the predicament of the black man in the simplest of terms when he said, "Moses parted the Red Sea, but make no mistake, black child, because for you, Pharaoh is on both sides." In this analogy, it seemed clear, at least to me, that for us, the figure of Moses represented Nelson Mandela, the man who became the face of the anti-apartheid struggle and the first president of a democratic South Africa. As a person raised on Christian fundamentalist sentiments, not only could I understand Dr. Cornel West and his train of thought, but it resonated with me and our situation in South Africa in a very profound manner. These words make complete sense to anyone living on the continent and the diaspora, and should make even more sense to Black South Africans in particular. Using the analogy of the allegory of Jewish flight from persecution during the time of Moses, we recall a point in time within the scripture where the Israelites were want for meat. Some of them decided to take the issue up with their liberators, Moses and Aaron, complaining that although Pharaoh was a harsh ruler and Egypt a land of oppression, they were never short of meat while enslaved. I forget what supernatural solution Moses employed with the assistance of God. However, it conveniently resulted in them having meat. If we bring this analogy back to our time and place in history, and indeed our current situation, we find that our leaders do not have those supernatural powers, nor do they have the assistance of a benevolent, omnipotent power, leaving the people of South Africa perpetually starved of meat.
And then when we say to you, the apartheid was much better than these people, you think, no, these people are exaggerating. We speak into the practical things that we see. The practical things that we see. The practical things that we see.
As a result, we find ourselves in a position where even our own leaders who fought apartheid, as well as those we consider revolutionaries, like Julius Malema, right down to ordinary citizens who lived through apartheid and as a result their descendants, have stated and defended their stances that apartheid was better. A highly surface level, dismissive statement that must be delved further into in a separate essay. What this then means is that we are left with a despondent population of black people who feel that apartheid was a better evil. Mainly because Baas, through harsh and tyrannical, as Pharaoh once was, and apartheid South Africa, though unjust, violent, inhumane, and unbearable, still provided them with a method of sustaining themselves, however limited the prospect of upward mobility due to enslavement laws that protected white people to the direct detriment of black people. These acts included the Bantu Building Workers Act No. 27 of 1951, which precluded employment of black people in the building industry from performing skilled jobs in white homes, and the Industrial Conciliation Amendment Act of 1956, which was a continuation of the 1924 and 1937 Act, which racialized trade unions and reinforced white job reservation practices. To the average black South African, their stomachs and families were, understandably, a priority, even in the wake of blatant injustice. This is the poignant and impoverished discourse in black South Africa to this day. Edward Bernays, in the 1928 book Propaganda, states that the minority has discovered a powerful help in influencing majorities. It has been found possible to mold the mind of the masses that they will throw their newly gained strength in their desired direction. It is by no means a stretch to assume that propaganda, which had been used by Europeans for almost 100 years by the time South Africa altered the anti-apartheid struggle, was used in achieving the pacification of a majority population and convincing them to subvert their interests in an effort to stop a civil war. That something hadn't been in effect for almost 50 years, from the moment the National Party government relegated 80% of the population to subhuman status, while systematically dispossessing them and suppressing any attempt at reconciliation with extreme, severe aggression.
And I can safely say today that the Bantu people are accepting the policy of self-development, which essentially is apartheid essentially is in an ever-increasing tempo. I feel confident that the Bantu leadership of Africa, rural and urban, will, by the turn of next year, show in a most marked way that they are satisfied that this policy leads to their salvation,
The Truth and Reconciliation Committee was an interesting exercise in perceived accountability. Looking at the process as well as its outcomes, it can be argued that the TRC had very little to do with justice for the impoverished, traumatized, dispossessed, disenfranchised, and psychologically damaged black populace. Instead, it seems as though it had everything to do with the assuaging of white guilt and the pacification and distraction of the black masses and their struggle long enough to achieve political consolidation for a select elite group, coupled with the consecration of neoliberal policies and protections. Then came the media and advertising companies to finish the job and profit off the Rainbow Nation propaganda, resulting in the complete whitewashing of Mandela and the true horrors of apartheid, the silencing of revolutionary voices like Chris Hani and Winnie Mandela, along with our failure to implement our own systems. We simultaneously skipped from one sporting event or beauty pageant to the next in an incessant search for that always elusive hope that we seek as the proof of our bettered condition, instead of demanding what we deserve. As a result, we have a people well adjusted and assimilated to injustice. In his essay titled Menticide, The Ultimate Threat to the Black Race, revolutionary thinker, psychologist, and activist Dr. Bobby E. Wright writes that some black groups, e.g. those of the United States and Azania, South Africa, are enslaved rather than being oppressed, exploited, etc., in that all their life-sustaining institutions are controlled by whites. He wrote this in 1978. Fast forward 42 years, 26 of them under a decolonized system, and we are still predominantly poor, with all our life-sustaining institutions fully controlled by whites. We are humiliated by white civilians on a frequent basis, and led by a government that is subservient in the wake of capitalist entities owned almost exclusively by whites. In the words of Sizwe Mpofu Welch, apartheid did not die, it was privatized. Let us not conflate issues. Reconciliation is a powerful word which needs difficult processes. However, I fear that in the context of South Africa, we have not examined the true meaning or application of this word or its context. According to the Oxford Dictionary, reconciliation is the end of a disagreement and the return to friendly relations. If this is the case, and we are indeed reconciled with white society, I would then ask whether at any point after that unfortunate date of 1652, black people had any quote-unquote disagreement or friendly relations with the European invaders. Can you reconcile with the thief who broke into your house, tied you and your family with ropes, raped and tortured some family members while ransacking your home, and relieved you of your possessions? If we are honest about our history, we will acknowledge that the entire fiasco was one encroachment and barbarous invasion after another, and the introduction of draconian laws to protect hijacked booty. Therefore, the concept of reconciliation would somehow suggest that black South Africans were responsible in part for their own dispossession and subjugation. Reconciliation is for the action of reconciling opposing ideas, facts, etc. Our grievances with colonization and apartheid do not fall into this category.